was the kidnapper, I would be extremely concerned right now.
Someone just sent a note claiming Nancy Guthrie is dead. They did not send it to the FBI. They did not send it to the police. They did not send it to a single law enforcement agency anywhere in the country. They sent it to TMZ, a celebrity news outlet. And what was written inside that note is the reason I stopped everything to bring you this story. But here is where it gets stranger. A few hours after that first note landed, a second one arrived. Same sender, same inbox, same day. And this time, the message was completely different. This time, the sender claimed they had seen Nancy Guthrie alive, and with her kidnappers, in the state of Sonora, Mexico. The first note says she is dead. The second note says she was seen breathing. The same person wrote both messages within hours of each other, and those two things cannot both be true. It has been 70 days. Nancy Guthrie, an 84-year-old grandmother from Tucson, Arizona, has been missing for more than 2 months. And on the exact morning those two contradictory notes arrived, her daughter Savannah Guthrie, one of the most recognizable journalists in America, walked back onto the set of the Today Show for the first time since the kidnapping. That timing is not a coincidence. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why. If this is your first time here on True Crime Investigator Alex, this is what we do. We go deep. We follow the evidence. We do not speculate. And we do not sensationalize. If that is the kind of investigation you value, take a moment right now and subscribe, because this case has layers that most people have not seen yet. And we are only getting started. Nancy raised 3 children in that house. Savannah, the youngest, who would go on to study at the University of Arizona, earn a law degree from Georgetown, and eventually become one of the most recognized broadcast journalists in the country as co-anchor of the Today Show. Annie, the oldest, who would become a published poet and jeweler, working as the marketing and publicity director for an independent press in Tucson. And Cameron, the middle child, who would serve his country as a fighter pilot in the Vermont Air National Guard for 26 years before retiring as a lieutenant colonel. The Guthrie children grew up close. They ate dinner together. They played games on Friday nights. They shared the kind of unremarkable, beautiful routines that only become precious in retrospect, when someone is no longer there to keep them going. Savannah would later describe the loss as a stark dividing line in her life. There was before her dad died, and there was after. She said the grief was profound and lifelong, something you carry with you always, like a cup that slowly empties over the course of a life, but never quite runs dry. She recalled her father as an amazing, magnetic, joyous personality with an unbending sense of right and wrong, a man whose moral clarity was demanding and sometimes intimidating, but who tempered it with kindness and mercy at the moments you most needed and least expected it. The family rearranged itself around Nancy. Savannah and Annie both chose to attend college close to home so their mother would not have to face an empty house. In a Mother's Day tribute years later, Savannah described how her mother set aside her own grief, in many ways, just to be there and make sure they could all move forward together. The siblings, she said, hung onto each other for dear life. She was active in her church community. She watched the javelina come into her yard and eat her plants, and laughed about it when Savannah filmed a homecoming feature for the Today Show in Tucson in November of 2025. During that segment, sitting at a restaurant with Savannah and Annie over lunch and a few sips of tequila, Nancy was asked what made her want to put down roots in Tucson. She smiled and said, "It is so wonderful. Just the air. The quality of life is so laid back and gentle." By 2026, Nancy was 84 years old, but her body was slowing down. She had limited mobility, difficulty walking more than short distances. She had a pacemaker. She depended on daily medication for a heart condition. Authorities would later describe her as a vulnerable adult. She was a woman who had survived the worst kind of loss, rebuilt her life from the wreckage, raised 3 accomplished children alone, and lived with quiet strength in the Arizona desert for more than 50 years. And then, sometime in the early morning hours of February 1st, 2026, someone came to her door and took her. But somewhere in the darkness, between 9:50 and 1:47 in the morning. Something changed, because at 1:47, Nancy's Google Nest doorbell camera disconnected. It did not lose power gradually. It did not glitch. It went offline. And when investigators later recovered the footage from residual back-end data, what they found on that camera made this case one of the most chilling missing persons investigations in recent American history. At approximately 2:12 in the morning, a secondary camera at the property detected motion. The system classified it as a person, but no video footage was available from that camera. Then, at 2:28, Nancy's pacemaker lost its connection to the monitoring app on her phone. The device that tracked the rhythm of her heart simply stopped syncing. It did not reconnect. That timestamp, 2:28 in the morning, is the moment investigators believe Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home. For the next 9.5 hours, no one knew she was gone. At 3 minutes past noon, a 911 call was placed. Deputies from the Pima County Sheriff's Department arrived at Nancy's home around 12:15. What they found inside that house changed the trajectory of everything. Blood was on the front porch. Not a large amount, but enough to matter. DNA testing would later confirm it belonged to Nancy. A trail of droplets led toward the front door. Inside, her phone sat untouched. Her wallet was still there. Her car had not moved. Her daily heart medication, the medication she could not survive long without, remained in the house, and the front security camera had been physically removed from its mount. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos held a press conference and delivered the assessment that would define this case from its very first hours. He said investigators believed Nancy had been taken from her home against her will, possibly in the middle of the night. He stated plainly that she could not have walked 50 yards by herself. She did not leave on her own. This was not a wandering elderly woman confused by dementia or disoriented by a fall. This was a crime scene, and the evidence inside that house told the story of a woman who had been removed from her own life by force. Homicide investigators were brought in alongside the search teams. The FBI joined the effort to provide additional resources. Customs and Border Protection deployed aerial and ground assets near the border. Search and rescue teams fanned out across the foothills with police dogs, drones, and helicopters. The community of Catalina Foothills, a quiet residential enclave where neighbors walk their dogs at dusk and know each other by name, found itself at the center of a national missing persons investigation. Within 24 hours, the case shifted from a search and rescue operation to a full criminal investigation. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, personally contacted Savannah Guthrie and pledged full federal resources. The FBI announced a $50,000 reward for information leading to Nancy's recovery, a figure that would double within days. Savannah stepped away from her broadcasting duties, which had been set to include co-hosting the opening ceremonies of the 2026 Winter Olympics. She released a statement thanking law enforcement and the public and urging anyone with information to come forward. Her career, her ambitions, her obligations, all of it became secondary to one thing: finding her mother. But there is something that happened in those earliest hours that would haunt this case for weeks to come. Sources close to the investigation later revealed to reporters that first responders initially assumed Nancy had somehow wandered off. They treated the scene as a search and rescue situation, not a criminal matter. The first deputy on the scene, reportedly, had never investigated a homicide. By the time the assessment shifted to criminal investigation, precious hours had already been lost. A former Pima County sheriff publicly accused current leadership of mishandling the early response and potentially compromising the crime scene. These criticisms would intensify over the following weeks as the investigation struggled to produce results. The early missteps did not destroy the case, but they cost it something that no amount of resources can recover: time. And in a case involving an 80% 4-year-old woman with a heart condition who depends on daily medication, time is the one currency that matters most. 10 days after Nancy vanished, the FBI released the most significant piece of evidence in the case, and it came from the very camera the suspect had tried to destroy. On February 10th, FBI Director Kash Patel posted 4 black-and-white images on social media showing a figure on Nancy Guthrie's front porch. The images were haunting. A man in a ski mask, eyes visible through the holes, wearing gloves, carrying a backpack, with a holstered pistol strapped improperly over his crotch. He approached the doorbell camera and attempted to knock it off its mount with light taps. When that failed, he covered the lens with his gloved hand. When that did not fully obscure the view, he reached down, ripped a plant from a potted arrangement near the door, and used the foliage to block the camera. He thought he had erased himself from the footage. He was wrong. Investigators recovered the video from residual data stored in the back-end systems of the Nest camera, even though the device did not have an active subscription at the time. Google, which manufactures Nest cameras, confirmed it was assisting with the investigation. The footage survived because digital traces are harder to eliminate than most people realize. And what that footage revealed was the single most important piece of evidence in the entire case. 2 days later, on February 12th, the FBI released additional details about the suspect based on careful analysis of the recovered video. They described him as a male with an average build, standing between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches tall. He had what appeared to be a black mustache visible through the openings in his ski mask. The backpack was identified as a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack, a product sold exclusively at Walmart for roughly $11. The holster was tentatively identified by a law enforcement officer not connected to the case as a large-sized strategy brand hip holster designed for a revolver, another Walmart product available for approximately $10. The ski mask itself bore a strong resemblance to yet another item sold at Walmart, though it appeared lighter in the footage because of the Nest camera's infrared night vision technology. Think about that for a moment. The total cost of this suspect's visible equipment was roughly $21, an $11 backpack, a $10 holster, a budget ski mask, disposable items, almost impossible to trace. The kind of gear you could buy with cash at any one of hundreds of Walmart locations across the Southwest and never leave a digital footprint. And yet the execution of the crime itself showed a level of discipline that left investigators struggling to find answers weeks later. No fingerprints confirmed at the scene, no usable DNA that could be immediately matched to a known individual, no cell phone pinging off nearby towers, no neighbor's camera catching a license plate or a vehicle description, no witness seeing or hearing anything unusual in a neighborhood where homes sit relatively close together. The Ring camera app founder, Jamie Siminoff, spoke publicly about the case, noting how the recovered footage had provided the most significant lead. But even with clear imagery of the suspect's eyes, build, and movements, no identification had been made. In a world of facial recognition software, cell tower analysis, and interconnected surveillance networks, the masked man on Nancy Guthrie's porch remained a phantom. One law enforcement insider described the suspect to reporters as either lucky as hell or more cunning than a lot of people seen in the past. If it was luck, the insider said, maybe that luck will run out. But if it was cunning, there's a chance he may have covered his tracks so well that we may not find out what happened. That distinction between fortune and calculation is the question that defines this entire investigation. But the doorbell footage revealed something else, something that pushed the timeline of this case back weeks before the kidnapping itself. Investigators discovered that the same masked figure, or someone matching a very similar description, appeared to have visited Nancy's property on January 11th, a full 3 weeks before she disappeared. The Pima County Sheriff's Department sent alerts to neighbors through the Ring app, requesting all available footage from that date between 9 in the evening and midnight. They also requested footage from January 30th between 9:30 in the morning and 11 in the morning, another previously undisclosed window of interest. Separately, Google Trends data observed by reporters appeared to show that someone had searched for Nancy Guthrie's home address online between June 21st and 28th of 2025, with the search originating from Arizona. That same address appeared to have been searched again on January 11th of 2026, the same date investigators flagged for the earlier visit to the property. Additional searches appeared to have been conducted for Savannah Guthrie's salary during overlapping time periods. If those searches are connected to the crime, it means whoever took Nancy Guthrie may have been planning this for more than 7 months. This was not a crime of impulse. This was calculated, methodical, patient. After the doorbell footage was released, the investigation entered a new phase. Thousands of tips poured in. Investigators received more than 4,000 new calls in the days immediately following the video's publication. The total number of leads would eventually climb past 40,000 and approach 50,000. 400 investigators were working the case at its peak, a staggering commitment of resources for a single missing persons investigation. Every available tool was deployed. A high-tech Bluetooth scanning device, known in law enforcement circles as a signal sniffer, was mounted on a helicopter and flown slow and low over the desert surrounding Nancy's home. The device was designed to detect the faint electronic signals emitted by medical devices like pacemaker. If Nancy's pacemaker was still transmitting, if she was within range, the signal sniffer would find it. The search was unsuccessful. Wherever Nancy was, she was beyond the reach of the scanner, or the pacemaker had stopped functioning entirely. Blue Fly, a technology company specializing in search and rescue operations, confirmed it had been assisting the Pima County Sheriff's Department since early February. The company said its technology had been used on a variety of air and ground vehicles and on foot in austere terrain, providing first responders with heat maps to identify signals within a search area. Beyond the technical assets, investigators canvassed businesses across the Tucson area. Walmart provided records of every Ozark Trail hiker pack purchased in recent months. Gun stores were visited and shown the doorbell footage. The FBI compiled between 18 and 24 names and photographs and presented them to a Tucson gun shop owner to see if any of the individuals had purchased a firearm. None of them matched. The investigators also looked closely at what they had recovered physically from the area. Gloves were found approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home. Not at the home itself, as some early reports suggested, but along a route leading away from the property. Preliminary DNA testing revealed the genetic material of an unknown male on the gloves. The gloves themselves appeared to match those worn by the suspect in the doorbell footage, the same type of black gloves visible in the video, as the man tried to cover the camera with his hand. The DNA profile from the gloves was submitted to the Combined DNA Index System, the national database maintained by the FBI that contains genetic profiles from convicted offenders and evidence collected at the scenes of unsolved crimes across the country. The result came back empty. No match. The suspect's DNA was not in the system. Whoever this person was, they had not been previously arrested for a qualifying offense, or their profile had simply never been collected. But the DNA challenges did not end there. Additional genetic material was collected from Nancy's property itself, separate from the gloves. This evidence presented an even more difficult problem. The samples contained mixed profiles from more than 2 individual contributors. In DNA analysis, when you have a mixture of 3 or more people's genetic material on a single surface, separating the profiles becomes extraordinarily complex. Some experts told reporters it was nearly impossible to conduct investigative genetic genealogy on such samples. Sheriff Nanos acknowledged the challenge publicly during a February interview. He said, "We believe that we may have some DNA there that may be our suspect, but we will not know that until that DNA is separated, sorted out, may be admitted to the database, maybe through genealogy." He maintained hope that the science would catch up to the evidence. Cheek swabs were taken from multiple individuals the investigators had spoken to during the course of their work. Their identities were not disclosed. The families of the Guthrie children and their spouses were all cleared as suspects by mid-February. Sheriff Nanos was emphatic on this point, stating publicly, "I am not going to sit in silence when others are attacking the innocent." The family, he said, had been fully cooperative from the first hour, and still, After all of that, after the helicopters and the signal sniffers, after the canvassing and the DNA submissions, after 40,000 tips and 400 investigators, no suspect has been named, no arrest has been made, no confirmed sighting of Nancy Guthrie has been reported anywhere in the world. If you have been following this investigation and want to stay informed as new developments emerge, make sure you are subscribed to True Crime Investigator Alex and tap that notification bell. This case is far from over, and the next break could come at any moment. Now let me take you into the most confusing and potentially most dangerous aspect of this entire investigation, the ransom notes. Because not all of them are the same. Not all of them come from the same source, and understanding the difference between the real and the fraudulent is the key to understanding where this case stands today. The first ransom note arrived on February 2nd, just one day after Nancy was reported missing. It was sent to Cold TV, a CBS affiliate in Tucson. The note demanded millions of dollars in Bitcoin. It included a wallet address and set two deadlines, one for February 5th and another for February 9th. But what made this note different from everything that followed was the level of detail it contained. According to reports, the note included information that was not publicly available at the time, including what Nancy was wearing when she was taken and specific details about what happened during the abduction. At least 3 news outlets received similar communications in the early days of the case. The FBI stated it was taking all such communications seriously, but there was something deeply unusual about these notes that former FBI agents immediately flagged. There was no direct communication between the kidnapper and the family. The notes went to media outlets, not to Savannah, not to Annie, not to Cameron. The kidnapper, if that is who sent the early notes, chose to negotiate through the press rather than through the people who could actually pay. That absence of direct contact remains one of the most perplexing aspects of this case. On February 4th, Savannah Guthrie and her siblings released an emotional video on social media. Standing together, they addressed the kidnapper directly. Savannah acknowledged the reports about a ransom letter. She said the family was ready to talk, but she also said something critical. She asked for proof that the kidnapper actually had their mother. In a world where voices and images are easily manipulated, the family needed verification before they could act. That same day, something else happened. A 42-year-old man from Hawthorne, California, named Derek Colella, sent 2 text messages to Nancy's daughter Annie and her husband Tommaso Cioni. The messages read, in part, "Did you get the Bitcoin? We are waiting on our end for the transaction." He also made a 9-second phone call to a family member. Colella was arrested and charged federally with transmitting a ransom demand in interstate commerce and using a telecommunications device with the intent to harass. He was not the kidnapper. He was an opportunist, a parasite feeding on a family's worst moment. After being read his Miranda rights, Colella admitted to investigators that he had sent the messages after following the case on television. He wanted to see if the family would respond. He wanted to see if there was money to be had. Court records painted a picture of a man with a pattern of alleged financial schemes. In October of 2025, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office had named Colella as one of 13 county employees accused of stealing a combined $437,000 in state unemployment benefits between 2020 and 2023. He had been charged with 1 felony count of grand theft and 1 misdemeanor offense. Now he had inserted himself into the highest-profile kidnapping case in the country, texting the victim's family as if he were holding the cards. The U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI released a statement saying they would continue to hold Colella accountable, as well as any other individuals who seek to interfere with federal investigations or profit from the victim's family's grief. Colella was released on bail, with conditions including electronic device monitoring and restricted travel between Arizona and California. He was prohibited from contacting potential witnesses or victims. His case, while fully separate from the kidnapping itself, became an early and infuriating example of a pattern that would define this investigation. From the very beginning, the real signals have been buried under layers of noise created by people trying to profit from a family's agony. And that noise would only grow louder. On February 5th, Savannah released another video, this time directly addressing the kidnapper. She urged whoever had her mother to reach out, to make contact, to give the family something to work with. Her brother Cameron posted a separate message saying, "Whoever is out there holding our mother, we want to hear from you. We have not heard anything directly. We need you to reach out, and we need a way to communicate with you so we can move forward. But first we have to know that you have our mom. We want to talk to you, and we are waiting for contact." That plea, direct and desperate, went unanswered. On February 7th, Savannah and her siblings released yet another video. This one carried a different weight. It appeared to be directed at a specific individual or group, someone the family believed they had received communication from. Savannah said, "We received your message, and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay." Those words, "we will pay," echoed across every network in the country. By February 8th, it was reported that the ransom demand was $6 million, with a final deadline of 5 p.m. on February 9th. That deadline came and went. No one collected. No one responded. On February 10th, the same day the FBI released the doorbell camera footage, a small Bitcoin transaction of approximately $152 was sent to the digital wallet listed in one of the ransom notes. Authorities did not confirm whether the transfer was connected to the investigation in any meaningful way, but someone, somewhere, had interacted with that wallet. Then, on February 24th, Savannah released a video announcing that the Guthrie family was offering a $1 million reward for information leading to Nancy's recovery. In that same message, she acknowledged what many had feared but no one had wanted to say aloud. She told the public that while the family still believed in a miracle, they also understood that their mother may already be gone. Around the same time, the family donated $500,000 to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, turning their private tragedy into a gesture that would support other families enduring the same kind of hell. The FBI independently offered $100,000 for information leading to Nancy's recovery or the arrest and conviction of anyone involved. A Wisconsin attorney named Michael Hoopie, president of Crime Stoppers Milwaukee, contributed an additional $102,500 through the local Crime Stoppers affiliate. Combined, the total reward for information in the Nancy Guthrie case reached approximately $1.2 million. And still, no one came forward with the answer. On March 26th, nearly 2 months into the nightmare, Savannah Guthrie sat down for her first public interview since her mother's disappearance. She spoke with former Today Show colleague Hoda Kotb in a conversation that was raw, unguarded, and devastating. Savannah revealed that she believed the first 2 ransom notes the family responded to were legitimate. She believed they came from the actual kidnapper. They contained details that only someone close to the crime would know. Details about what Nancy was wearing, about the circumstances of the abduction, things that had not been released to the public. She also told Kotb about her plan to return to the Today Show. She said, "I cannot come back and try to be something that I am not. I do not know if I can do it. I do not know if I will belong anymore, but I would like to try." And then she said the thing that has haunted her every day since February 1st, the thing that reframes the entire case. She told Kotb that she feared her mother had been targeted because of Savannah's fame, because of her visibility as one of the most watched morning television anchors in America, because her salary, her public profile, her face in millions of living rooms every morning, may have drawn a predator's attention not to Savannah herself, but to the most vulnerable person in her life, her 84-year-old mother, living alone in a house in the desert. She said, "It is too much to bear to think that I brought this to her bedside, that it is because of me." That guilt, whether justified or not, is the emotional core of this case. It is the thing that separates this investigation from the thousands of missing persons cases that occur in America every year. Because if Savannah is right, if Nancy was taken because of who her daughter is, then this case carries implications that extend far beyond one family's tragedy. It raises the question of whether public figures, by the very nature of their visibility, put their loved ones at risk simply by being who they are. Sheriff Nanos addressed the motive question directly in a March interview with the Today Show's Liz Kreutz. He said investigators believed they understood why the suspect had done this and believed the attack was targeted, but he would not elaborate. He added a chilling caveat. When asked if the public should be concerned that the suspect could strike again, Nanos said, "We believe it was targeted, but we are not 100% sure of that. And so it would be silly to tell people, yeah, do not worry about it. You are not his target. No, you could be." The FBI has not publicly commented on the motive. The investigation into the why of this crime remains as opaque as the investigation into the who. Now we arrive at the part of this story that makes the investigation infinitely more complicated: the noise. Starting on February 11th, 10 days after Nancy vanished, a separate individual began sending messages to TMZ. This sender was not the kidnapper. They claimed to know who the kidnapper was. The first message offered the kidnapper's name in exchange for 1 Bitcoin. More messages followed in the weeks after. Each time, the demands grew smaller, but the claims grew bigger. The original ransom from the first set of notes had been $6 million. This sender's price dropped to $70,000. Then it dropped to $35,000. The value they placed on Nancy Guthrie's life kept shrinking. And that pattern alone tells you something critical about the person behind the messages. TMZ described this sender with a single word: incessant. They had been writing repeatedly for nearly 2 months. Message after message, demand after demand, claim after claim. Then came April 6th, day 70. That morning, Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show for the first time since her mother's disappearance. She had been away for more than 2 months, the longest absence in her tenure as CO anchor. She had missed assignments she had prepared for years to cover, including co-hosting the opening ceremonies of the 2026 Winter Olympics. She had watched from the sidelines as her colleagues carried the broadcast without her, as the news cycle churned on, as the world kept turning while hers had stopped. She walked onto the set wearing a yellow dress, a deliberate nod to the color of hope that had come to represent the search for her mother. The yellow ribbons tied to lampposts and mailboxes across Tucson. The yellow flowers left on Nancy's doorstep by strangers who had never met her, but who refused to forget her. Her co-anchor, Craig Melvin, wore a yellow tie. The message was clear, without being spoken. Savannah opened the broadcast with 5 words. "It is good to be home." Melvin responded, "It is good to have you back at home." And then she did what she has done thousands of mornings before. She turned to the camera and did the news. She covered the escalating situation between the United States, Israel, and Iran. She reported the day's headlines. She was, for those minutes, the professional her audience had always known. But later in the broadcast, when she gathered with her colleagues to thank fans assembled outside the studio in Rockefeller Center, the composure cracked. Supporters had come from across the region, wearing yellow ribbons, holding handmade signs. One read, "We love you, Savannah." Another read, "Decide and do," a tribute to the advice Nancy had given her daughter after Charles died all those years ago. Savannah fought back tears as she thanked them. "You guys have been so beautiful," she said. "I have received so many letters, so much kindness, to me and my whole family. We feel it. We feel your prayer, so thank you so much." It should have been a moment of quiet resilience, a grieving daughter reclaiming a small piece of her normal life. Instead, it became the backdrop for the most contradictory pair of messages in the entire investigation. That same morning, 2 new notes arrived in TMZ's inbox from the same persistent sender. The first note claimed Nancy Guthrie was no longer alive. The sender said they knew where her body was. They said they knew who the kidnappers were and where they were hiding, and they were willing to hand over everything for half a Bitcoin, roughly $35,000. They wanted the first half deposited before sharing any information, and the second half after a public arrest was made. The sender also claimed they had nothing to do with the crime, that they had been outside the United States for more than 5 years, and that they were not motivated by greed but simply wanted to start their life again quietly. A few hours later, the second note arrived. Same sender. Completely different claim. This time, the sender wrote that they had seen Nancy alive with her kidnappers in the state of Sonora, Mexico. Sonora is a Mexican border state that sits approximately 70 miles from Nancy's home in Tucson. This was the first time any communication in the entire case had mentioned a specific, verifiable location. For a fraction of a second, that detail makes your pulse quicken. A real place, a measurable distance, something investigators could theoretically act on. But then you remember the first note, the one that said she was dead, written by the same person on the same day. And that contradiction is exactly what caught the attention of Jason Pack, a retired FBI supervisory special agent with decades of experience analyzing exactly these kinds of communications. Pack identified multiple red flags in the notes. The first was the timing. These messages arrived on the precise morning that Savannah Guthrie returned to national television after 2 months away. Pack pointed out that real witnesses do not track the news cycle. If someone truly knew where Nancy was, they would not wait for the most dramatic possible moment to come forward. They would contact the FBI directly. They would call Crime Stoppers. They would not write to an entertainment outlet on the same day the victim's daughter goes back on air. The second red flag was the contradiction itself. You cannot claim someone is dead and simultaneously claim you saw them alive. One of those statements is necessarily false. And if the sender is lying about one of the two most important details in the entire case, there is no reason to trust anything else they are saying. The third red flag was the method of delivery. Pack stated it plainly. The fact that they are sending letters to TMZ instead of contacting the FBI tells you everything you need to know about their credibility. Real witnesses call law enforcement. Real witnesses do not negotiate through entertainment media. Real witnesses do not demand Bitcoin in exchange for the location of a body. Jennifer Coffindaffer, a retired FBI special agent who has been publicly following the case, went further. She called the notes fraudulent, flat out, not credible, not worth pursuing on their face. In her assessment, this sender has no real information and is attempting to extract money from a tragedy that has gripped the nation. But Coffindaffer also made an interesting counterpoint. She suggested that authorities should consider paying the Bitcoin anyway. Not because the sender is credible, but because Bitcoin is highly traceable through blockchain analysis. Paying the requested amount could allow the FBI to follow the money, identify the wallet owner, and either confirm the sender is a fraud or, in the unlikely event they have real information, act on what they provide. Whether or not that approach is taken remains to be seen. The Pima County Sheriff's Office responded to questions about the new notes with the same statement they have used throughout the investigation. All tips and leads are taken seriously and passed directly to detectives working with the FBI. But the FBI has not moved on these TMZ notes. No searches have been conducted in Sonora. No raids. No public statement confirming any element of what the sender has claimed. And the Bitcoin wallet the sender provided in their messages has received exactly 0 transactions. Not a single deposit. The wallet is completely empty. If anyone with authority or resources believed this person had real information, someone would have paid by now. No one has. Let me connect the pattern, because the pattern is what matters. There are 2 distinct streams of ransom communications in this case. The first stream went directly to the family and to news outlets in the earliest days after the kidnapping. Those notes contained non-public details. They included specifics about what Nancy was wearing and what happened during the abduction. Savannah herself said she believes at least 2 of those notes were real. The FBI investigated them. They tracked the Bitcoin wallets. They contacted Mexican authorities. Those notes carried weight. The second stream began on February 11th and has continued for nearly 2 months. These notes go exclusively to TMZ. They come from someone claiming to be a third party, not the kidnapper, but someone who says they know who the kidnapper is. The demands have shrunk from millions to thousands. The claims have grown from vague to Contradictory, dead and alive on the same day. Mexico and mystery and money, always money, but never enough to suggest someone with real leverage. Two senders, two motives. One set of notes might be real, the other is almost certainly not. And the FBI appears to know the difference, because they acted on the family notes and have done nothing with the TMZ messages. But here's the thing that makes the noise more dangerous than it might appear. Every time one of these fraudulent notes gets attention, it pulls resources away from the real investigation. It creates false leads. It floods already overwhelmed tip lines. It gives the public either false hope or false despair, depending on which note they read first. And most critically, it gives the actual person who took Nancy Guthrie room to breathe. Because when everyone is arguing about a note that contradicts itself in the same breath, nobody is looking at the masked figure who walked up to an 84-year-old woman's front door in the dead of night and disappeared with her into the desert. The FBI and Mexican authorities have been in contact since the early days of the case. The coordination was significant enough to reach the highest levels of Mexican law enforcement. The Attorney General of the state of Sonora stated publicly that his office had no information to suggest Nancy Guthrie was in Mexican territory, specifically in the state of Sonora. Mexico's Criminal Investigation Agency Commissioner General confirmed that the FBI informed them they currently had no leads pointing to Nancy being in Mexico. The border is close, roughly 60 to 70 miles from Nancy's home in the Catalina foothills, and the possibility that she could have been transported across it was always on the table. Investigators from both countries pursued that angle. But as of the most current reporting, there is no verified evidence she was taken into Mexico. There is, however, a haunting historical detail that hangs over this case like a shadow. Nancy's husband Charles died during a mining trip in Mexico in 1988. The family has a connection to the country that stretches back nearly 4 decades. Whether that connection has any relevance to the current investigation is unknown. Investigators have not drawn any public link between the two, but it lingers in the background, a piece of the Guthrie family's history that echoes through this case in ways no one can fully explain. It is also worth noting that the only mention of Mexico in any communication connected to this case came from the least credible source available, the TMZ sender, and it arrived in the same batch of messages that simultaneously claimed Nancy was dead and alive. No law enforcement agency has corroborated that claim in any way. As of today, Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 68 days. No suspect has been publicly identified. No arrest has been made. No confirmed sighting of Nancy has been reported anywhere on Earth. Her pacemaker has not transmitted a signal since 2:28 in the morning on February 1st. She has been without her daily heart medication for more than 2 months. Physicians and medical experts who have commented on the case have expressed growing concern that the absence of her medication for this length of time could have life-threatening consequences for a woman of her age and condition. The investigation has been marred by internal tensions that have played out in public view. The Pima County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to question Sheriff Nanos about his work history and his management of the department. An independent firm released the findings of a workplace harassment complaint against the sheriff, brought by a former lieutenant who had lost to Nanos in the 2024 election. A deputy from the sheriff's department was arrested and fired on an entirely unrelated kidnapping charge during the same period, adding another layer of institutional embarrassment at the worst possible moment. None of these developments have been officially linked to the Nancy Guthrie case, but they arrive at a time when the investigation is under intense national scrutiny, when former prosecutors and retired FBI agents are openly questioning the competence of the department on television, and when the public's patience is wearing dangerously thin. Former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole examined the doorbell footage and identified what she described as an apparent mistake by the masked individual, not as proof that he was inept, but as an indication that even careful perpetrators can make errors under pressure. The question is whether those errors, however small, will be enough for investigators to follow to a resolution. Through it all, The community of Tucson has refused to let go. Yellow ribbons hang from porches and storefronts across the Catalina foothills and beyond. A local artist who goes by the name Pinky has been leaving canvas paintings outside Nancy's home, including one that reads, "Nancy, all of us are praying for you to come home now." Neighbors describe the unsettling reality of watching the doorbell footage and recognizing that the masked man was standing on a porch just yards from their own front doors. One neighbor told reporters, "Seeing that monster come onto the porch is horrible. My mom lives here in town. She lives alone. Now I am worried as heck about her." On March 21st, the Guthrie family released a public statement asking the community for renewed attention and vigilance. "No detail is too small," they wrote. They meant it. Every strange car, every unfamiliar face, every small thing that did not feel right in the days and weeks before and after Nancy disappeared. All of it matters. All of it could be the thread that unravels the whole thing. The FBI tip line remains active. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has set up a dedicated online form for submitting information. Crime Stoppers guarantees complete anonymity through its established protocols. The combined reward stands at approximately $1.2 million for anonymous, credible information. No name required, no questions asked. Crime Stoppers, the organization administering part of that reward, does not even keep records of the informants it pays. Tipsters receive a unique code number when they provide information. If that tip leads to an arrest, they collect the reward using the code, not their identity. There is no paper trail. There is no follow-up contact. It is, by design, the safest possible way for someone to share what they know without ever revealing who they are. Michael Hoopie, the Wisconsin attorney who funded the Crime Stoppers portion of the reward, put it plainly, "Come forward, you will be anonymous. And if you have the right information, you will get a reward." He said he contributed 6 figures to the Guthrie case because the circumstances of her disappearance were alarming, and because he believed financial incentive, combined with guaranteed anonymity, would eventually break the wall of silence. And yet that wall has held for 68 days, through more than 40,000 tips, through a $1.2 million reward, through national media coverage that has kept this case in the headlines week after week. No one has provided the piece of information that unlocks it all, and that absence raises a question that is as troubling as any piece of evidence in the case. Why? Is someone protecting the kidnapper? Is there a network of people who know something but are bound together by loyalty or fear? Is the suspect so isolated, so disconnected from anyone who might recognize them, that there is truly no one in their orbit who has noticed something wrong? Or has the sheer volume of noise, the fake notes, the scammers, the contradictory messages flooding in from all directions, buried the one honest voice that might have spoken up? Former FBI Special Agent Harry Trombitas suggested that the ongoing media exposure is deliberate and strategic. He told reporters that he believed the timing of Savannah's public appearances was likely coordinated between the sheriff's office, the FBI, and the Guthrie family. The goal, he said, was to humanize Nancy, to keep her face and her story in the public consciousness, and to persuade whoever is holding her, or whoever knows what happened, to do the right thing. Because somewhere out there, Trombitas said, there are still people who have no idea that Nancy Guthrie is missing, and getting the information in front of the right person, at the right moment, could be the thing that breaks the case open. And still, the silence holds. Savannah Guthrie returned to her anchor desk on April 6th. She wore yellow. She did the news. She thanked the crowd through tears. And then she went back to doing the only thing she can do, which is to keep going while the world watches and the desert keeps its secrets. Someone knows what happened to Nancy Guthrie. Someone knows who walked up to that porch at 1:47 in the morning, wearing a ski mask and carrying an $11 backpack and a $10 holster. Someone knows where the masked man went after the doorbell camera went dark. Someone knows what vehicle he used. Someone knows where he sleeps at night. Someone has seen something, heard something, noticed something that did not feel right in the days or weeks or months before and after February 1st, and someone is counting on the hope that the noise, the fake notes, the contradictions, the shrinking demands, the 2-month stream of incessant messages from a sender who cannot even keep their own story straight, will keep drowning out the truth long enough for the trail to go cold, long enough for the public to move on, long enough for this case to fade from the front page and settle into the long, quiet archive of unsolved crimes that nobody talks about anymore. But here's the thing about this case. It has not faded. 68 days in, and the nation is still watching. 40,000 tips and counting. $1.2 million on the table. A daughter who went back to work on national television, wearing the color of hope and fighting through tears, because she refuses to let the world forget her mother's name. The question is whether the truth will outlast the silence, or whether the silence will become permanent. Whether the DNA that sits in a lab in Florida will yield a profile that matches a name. Whether the genetic genealogy that seemed nearly impossible will find a pathway through the mixed samples. Whether a neighbor's camera will turn up footage that nobody realized they had. Whether a person who has been too afraid to come forward will finally decide that $1.2 million and guaranteed anonymity is enough to overcome whatever is holding them back. Or whether the masked man on the porch, the man who spent $21 at Walmart and took an 84-year-old grandmother from her bed in the middle of the night, will simply vanish into the same desert he emerged from, untouched, unnamed, unpunished. That is the question this case comes down to. And until it is answered, Nancy Guthrie's story is not over. Her family will not stop. The investigators will not stop, and neither will we. If you believe this story deserves to be heard, share this video with someone who needs to see it. If you want to follow every development as it unfolds, subscribe to True Crime Investigator Alex and turn on notifications, because this investigation is not over. The next piece of evidence, the next credible tip, the next honest voice could change everything. And when it does, we will be here to tell you about it. If you or anyone you know has information about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, please contact the FBI tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI. You can also reach the Pima County Sheriff's Department tip line at 520-351-4900, or call Crime Stoppers at 88-CRIME, which is 520-882-7463. Tips can be submitted anonymously. Your identity will be protected. Your call could be the one that matters. Nancy Guthrie spent her whole life holding her family together through the hardest things a person can endure. When her husband died suddenly at 49, she held on. When she had to raise 3 children alone in the desert, she held on. When her daughters stayed close to home for college because they could not bear to leave her by herself, she told Savannah that if you cannot leave me, then I did not do my job right. She pushed her children into the world, even when it would have been easier to keep them close. She put their futures ahead of her loneliness. She found work, built a career, served her community, and lived with a kind of fierce, quiet grace that the people who knew her best describe as unshakable. Now it is the world's turn to hold on for her. 68 days and counting. The desert is vast. The silence is deep. But the truth has a way of surfacing, even from the driest ground. And when it does, whoever took Nancy Guthrie from that porch in the dark of night will discover that the silence they have been hiding behind was never as safe as they thought it was. This is True Crime Investigator Alex, and we are not done with this case.